back when I was in the throes of cancer, my parents became intrigued with the acupuncture work that I was doing with Dr. Chen, who I called Jedi Master Chen, who was the guru in my Hero of 1,000 Faces journey. He was the magical being that shows up early after you have taken on the challenge and you've decided to go into the rabbit hole. So this magical being shows up that engages you, is the catalyst. They are the catalyzer to the other world that the individual who is on the journey thinks they know about, but they don't know about. And it's like when you think you know all that there is to know about something, and then you meet someone that introduces you to this entirely different side of understanding to what you thought you knew about. That person, in a sense, becomes like a magical being to you because you thought that you totally understood something, and they completely rendered this in completely different understanding to you. And so this magical being is essential to that journey for you. Okay. So I'm having this, all these epiphanies with Dr. Chen, because he's, one of these days I'll get around to telling my cancer story again. But he's performing and doing all these things that just, there's no possible way that under the understanding of science and metaphysics and spirituality and so forth that I was under at the time, there was no explanation for what he was doing. And so he was introducing me to a deeper truth, to a deeper understanding, even though he's not like trying to teach me, he's not like sitting me down and giving me a sermon or anything. Just by observing this individual and by the few words, he hardly ever said anything, but by the few words they say, it's like boom, 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 all these explosions going off in your psyche because you're coming into these deeper and deeper principles and understanding. Well, what was really interesting was when my parents went to see Dr. Chen, right? This Eastern medicine acupuncturist, Buddhist. I asked Dr. Chen later on. Now Dr. Chen, he didn't laugh much. It was a very interesting relationship I had with him. But he said he wouldn't say anything about what happened when they were there. But he said to me, he goes, Chuck, they were very suspicious. He said they were looking. That's how he described it. It was just great. It was beautiful. And what it did was it made me think, what? That's how I was when I was in a Buddhist's house, and they've got the little statue of Buddha in their house. And I remember when I was a full-blown Christian, I would walk into these environments and I was suspicious because they're outside the tribe. This is a foreign tribe. I am in a foreign tribal system, a spiritual system that is incongruent with the spiritual system with which I was indoctrinated. And so there is a tremendous amount of fear, suspicion that I experienced, and discontinuity and alienation that I felt and experienced when I was in there. And it was all totally sourcing in my head, because now when I walk into a Buddhist's home, I'm completely like, wow, I totally want to learn from you, and I totally want to understand more about your experience spiritually, because I have so little experience with that, and so few people that I've had in my life that have been Buddhists. And so again, it's just in the head, and it's amazing what all of these filters, they're like comb filters in audio, when you have two of the same sound sources and you mix them together really close together, it causes what's called a flange. And a flange is this hypercomb filtering that's happening, which is there are sound acoustical waves that are completely canceling out to zero, and then there are other acoustical waves in the sound, with the complex sound waves as they combine, that build upon one another, that cause really strong resonance. And so you have this zeroing out and really strong resonance, and it causes this kind of wind noise, which I'm sure is what's happening when the wind blows through the thistles of the pine tree. And that this flanging type of sound begins to happen. This filtering kind of sound tends to happen. And that's exactly what happens when you have a program that that's been downloaded into your head called Christianity, and you get around a person who isn't a Christian. You have these moments of like epiphany. We're like, oh yeah, I totally see that just like you, right? And then you have these moments of just like, no. Like when they're like, no, Jesus never existed and there was no crucifixion. It's an immediate canceling out. It's immediate zeroing out, like, okay, no identity, no, you're wrong, I'm right, and like, no, Jesus existed and he died on the cross and you are mistaken, Mr. or Mrs., and that's all there is to it. And then there's this other moment where they'll say to you, and a lot of Christians are starting to embrace this idea in the metaphysical sense, of this oneness sense. And so the Christian, even though they see oneness in a totally different perspective than the Buddhist sees oneness, just the fact that they're calling it oneness and they're talking about similar principles, you're going to have a combining of these energies, right? And so by having this program in your head, this spiritual program, you walk through life like a comb filter, like a flanger. And all the audio people are totally understanding what I'm saying right now, and people that aren't audio are like, what? The point I'm trying to make is that it is distorting the source. It is distorting your ability to hear, to see, to feel, to experience source. Because you are comb filtering your world experience with things like suspicion and things like self-righteousness, saying to the Buddhist, no, I'm right, there was Jesus and he died for you. And you are distorting your ability to experience the world lucidly, with no filtering. That's why they say that term, you have to leave God for God. You have to leave the concept you have of God to experience the concept that is outside of the concept you have of God, which isn't a concept, right? Okay. What begins to happen is you have people that have these experiences with death, these experiences of divorce, these experiences of extreme pain, extreme torture in some sense, metaphysical torture or mental torture, whatever, physical torture. And this breaks them out of that structure of insistencies. It breaks them out of that because it forces them into a realm where that structure of insistency would have kept them from that realm. And by having to go into that realm and experience it and live it and come to terms with it and equate your mind and heart to it, right? You then open up doors of perception which would not have ever been opened had you not been approached by this radical experience, which forced you out of those insistencies. Here's another great example. You are a Christian couple, embedded in Christianity and doctrine in it from birth, and you are completely anti-homosexual, completely. And you're going about life, living life, everything's fine, you're doing your church thing, and you're completely anti-homosexual. And then you have a child, you have two kids. Your first child's completely straight, the second one is homosexual, right? And this begins to surface, say, around age 8, around age 12, around age 14, when puberty starts to kick in, right? And this couple is forced into a situation that they never, ever, ever would have entered, which is having to deal with homosexuality, because they have a child now that is a homosexual and that is claiming homosexual and says, I want to be homosexual, I like homosexuality, and I like the same sex. And here are the parents who would have never entered into the world of homosexuality, and they are being forced into that world because now they have this child that they love and adore and care for with all their heart, soul, and mind, and this child is saying, I'm a homosexual. So these parents do everything by the book, right? So they take him down to the pastor. The pastor gives them this big old guilt trip about why it's not okay to be homosexual, why it's a sin, why it's an abomination, and that doesn't work. So then they go and they join another group of fellow Christian parents that also have homosexual kids, and they don't want their kid to be homosexual, so they join that group. And they find there's no answers because the Bible insists that homosexuality is not okay as far as Christian, conservative, Christianity is concerned, right? The Catholic Church gave it up, right? But the conservative Christian church, say non-denominational or evangelical church, still insists, no, homosexuality is not okay, right? So now that group doesn't give them any answers, and this couple, what is happening is they are being grinded with the hard reality that there's nothing wrong with homosexuality, but they have a problem because they have subscribed to this religion. So this goes on and on and on, just like when I had cancer. I keep facing day after day after day dying. I keep having the disease, and it's not letting me go, and it's not releasing me from this tension. It will not let me go. And it's the same situation with the couple that has the gay child. They have this child that they love and adore, but they insist to be homosexual. They are a homosexual, and that's what they want. That's what they're gonna be, and they're not gonna change. And what this process does is it breaks down structures, which is what I am trying to do with all of these examples that I give everybody with Christianity and how it's inhumane. And what I'm doing is I'm coming along with a bat and a big sledgehammer, and I'm hammering away at these foundational insistencies, structures, truths that the conservative Christian is entrenched in. They're entrenched in it. And I'm coming along with my sledgehammer, and this is me right now, hammering your psyche. And so all the people that are hearing this that are Christians are just completely dismissing me, saying, dude, this guy's completely lost. So I have all kinds of time for people that are in a situation like the Christian couple that are insisting that, no, my son or daughter is going to go to hell because they insist to be a homosexual. They're going to go. So I'm going to keep fighting, keep figuring out a way to win them back and get them back. I even have in my own extended family, there are born again hardcore Christians that know my stand. And all the time when I talk to them, they're always trying to get me. They're saying, no, Chuck, you don't understand grace. No, you don't. You're misunderstanding. You don't understand the approach. You're too negative. You're too focused in on sin. You're too focused in on the stuff that God says get you to hell. You're totally myopically focused in that, Chuck. And so these people keep dismissing me, right? They keep dismissing, because they insist that Christianity is the only way. Jesus is the way, truth, and life, and there's no other way to heaven but through Jesus. They keep insisting, right? And so when I come along and I say and make these claims, and then back it up with hardcore, real psychology that is totally based in the reality that you completely know as truth as far as understanding yourself psychologically, I'm coming along with very valid and legitimate examples. And I'm coming along and saying, your insistence that Christianity is the only way holds absolutely zero water. And I have given example after example after example of its intolerance. of its domination, of its insistence to usurp others, to pickpocket people's hearts, to insist to call the world fallen, insist to call the person's heart as fallen and can't be trusted. And I'm coming along and I'm showing you time and time again how calling homosexuals sinners, how saying that if you're homosexual you're going to go to hell, how saying if you have sex outside of marriage how that's a sin and that you're going to go to hell. And I'm coming along saying no. None of that is true, none of that is correct, none of that is right, and none of that leads to moral behavior, none of it. Now here we get into doors of perception. Aldous Huxley wrote an incredible book you should read called The Doors of Perception. And this book will help introduce a person into realizing their comb filtering, into realizing how their insisted perception of the world as a Christian skews and distorts and taints what the world really is. Okay, this is why people that get tremendous anxiety when they use cannabis, okay? The reason why, and I'll speak specifically to the Christians because I was a Christian that used cannabis and experienced anxiety, okay? And I'm going to tell you right now why most Christians experience such strong anxiety when they smoke or use cannabis and get high. What is happening is they're comb filtering, their spiritual filtering system, it's beginning to be dissolved. The filter is being sequestered from the Christian's mind when they begin to get more and more high on cannabis, because they're no longer able to insist their opinion, and that causes anxiety because all of a sudden what they have depended upon to maintain equilibrium in their psyche is now being released, because they realize that all that insistency that they were putting into their life was only keeping them from source, was only keeping them from understanding, was only keeping them from experiencing bliss in the here and now. This is why hallucinogenic drugs, namely psilocybin mushrooms, DMT, dimethyltryptamine, what are some really good strong psychedelic drugs? Ibogaine, which is a plant drug used for people that are addicted to heroin. It gets you off heroin in 48 hours with no withdrawals. Ayahuasca. These are drugs that dissolve boundary structures. They dissolve the structures that you have insisted upon the world to make the world what you insist and want it to be. If you've been indoctrinated, you will insist the world to be Christianity, and anything outside of that is wrong and should be avoided, run from, or corrected, whatever the case. And so when you take these hallucinogenic drugs, and even cannabis is a hallucinogenic drug, because if you use it long-term over time, it will break down your boundary structures. So when you take one of these really strong hallucinogenic drugs, for a period of about 4 to 8 hours, all of your structures completely melt away into zero. And you can only know what that means by experiencing it. And I'm not going to even try to describe it to you. But it's unbelievable what happens. Because what happens is the hard drive in your brain that was programmed with whatever religion it was programmed with is erased, is completely erased. And as an adult, it allows you to come out of that hallucinogenic drug experience and experience the world without all those boundaries. Because when you were in that space experiencing the world, you were experiencing the world where there was no such thing as time, there was no such thing as up or down, right or left, in or out, there's no such thing as separation. everything. You are one with everything. You don't have to try to think about it. You actually do experience what it's like to be a tree, what it's like to be dirt, what it's like to be the sky, what it's like to be the sun. Because the boundaries that your human consciousness insists that separate you dissolve. And that allows you to experience the world in a sense of oneness. That's why it's a gift. That's why a lot of people that go into these in a proper setting, properly prepared in a shamanistic sense, that's why the people that experience that have such life epiphanies. It's because they, for the first time in their life, experience the world clean. They experience the world lucidly. They experience a world that is free of the religious filth that was programmed onto their hard drive in their brain, their psyche in their brain. And that's what happens. And so the Christian fears that experience with everything, because